And we want to say welcome to all of you. Thank you. Happy Monday once again, and happy end of July. Hope everyone is doing well. It is an honor and privilege to be here with all of you, taking the time out of your busy schedules to be here with us on this quick hour. It's a quick hour of encouragement, an hour of action. So we want to make sure that we are here having a great time. But we also know that this is a serious moment. So before we get right into it, I want to introduce myself to all of you. My name is Jamel Henderson, and I am honored to be here in this space today. I wear many, many hats, but in this particular space, I'm honored to not only represent the as a member of CUNY Rising Alliance, as the New York City Regional Board Chair for Citizen Action of New York. So big shout out to Citizen Action, all the work that you're doing. But I'm also a proud student. I have been with the City University of New York since the spring of 2004. And next year it will be my 20th year, and I'll be graduating with my 5th degree, and it will be a doctorate degree from the College of Staten Island, focused on community-based leadership. The City University of New York has really opened up so many doors for me, but more importantly, as a college student who came out the foster care system, who lives in NYCHA, who really constantly is on the ground, really encouraging the people, the importance of education and how it is a phenomenal upward mobility for many homes, especially in the Black community and our Hispanic, Latino communities. It is a challenge to see what is happening right now in our court system. I'll just quickly say this, and then we just going to jump right into the panelists. I remember doing a workshop back in 2015. And this was, 2016. This was during the election of Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. And I said to a community board that this election is not about the presidency, quite on contrary to beliefs. It's actually about the courts. And I said that the worst case scenario, this is back in 2016, I said the worst case scenario that the United States could have, should Donald Trump win, is a 6-3 or a 7-2 conservative majority. And I remember saying this back in 2016, that if that should occur, Roe v. Wade will be on the line, Voting Rights Act will be on the line, affirmative action will be on the line, and so many other landscape policies and decisions that really help many racial ethnic communities that are in today. So unfortunately, here we are many years later, and we have a 6-3 conservative majority, and many of the decisions that we stand on the shoulders of from many racial ethnic backgrounds fighting for equality and justice have been chipped away. Now, the good thing is that the powers between the governments, they work very, very well, where even though this is a federal decision, the states do have the decision to either enforce it or say no. And we've seen that happen many times with Roe v. Wade and other decisions. But for this particular one, this is really impacting millions of Americans who have an opportunity to enter higher education, do affirmative action, and as well as many alums and those who are continuing to pursue higher education like myself and are taking out student loans and are, collecting a massive amount of student debt. So this panel is going to bring all of that together, and we hope that you all will be enlightened and empowered by this phenomenal group. And once again, we want to thank the members of CUNY Rising Alliance, led by the phenomenal coordinator, Ethan, who's behind the scenes working so hard for us today. So let's jump right in. We're going to ask the panelists to introduce themselves, and you can share your name and position, and we'll popcorn it to each one, and then we'll jump right into the questions. That sounds good? So I will begin with Carolina.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. It is great to have this conversation. My name is Carolina Rodriguez. I'm the director of a program initiative called the Education Debt Consumer Assistance Program, which is part of the Community Service Society, a nonprofit here in New York.
Awesome. Thank you, Carolina. And we will popcorn it to Winston.
Great. Thanks so much, Jamel, for that opening. Good evening, everyone. Really great to be with you. My name is Winston Berkman-Breen. I'm the legal director at a group called the Student Borrower Protection Center. We're a national nonprofit focused on the student debt crisis in all of its forms, from federal student loans to private student loans to school-based debt. And we use a combination of lawmaking, regulatory advocacy, litigation, and consumer education to address the student debt crisis. And we're a national group, but I'm based here in Brooklyn, New York.
Excellent. Thank you so much for being here, Winston. And of course, we have Frank. Welcome.
Hello, everybody. My name is Frank Deale. I'm a professor of law at CUNY Law School. I'm also a former legal director of the Center for Constitutional Rights.
All right, so we have an excellent panel that's going to cover a whole lot of things, and there's so much to cover in such quick time, so we're going to jump right into it. So let's begin with you, Professor Deale. Can I say Frank? Is that okay? I usually like to ask permission. All right. Thank you, Frank. So can you give us, for those who may not know, let's just say, you know, somebody just walking by, they just popped into this webinar and they wanted to know, can you give us this brief description of what affirmative action is and how has it historically benefited Black and Hispanic students? And what were the leading factors that pushed the Supreme Court into overturning such an important legal precedent?
Okay, I'll try to be as brief and direct as possible. First of all, in terms of the historical background of affirmative action, we actually think of it, affirmative action, as being a form of remedy, a form of legal remedy, meaning that if an institution has been found to have engaged in various forms of discrimination, a court has the authority to essentially impose affirmative action as a legal remedy on that institution to have them correct the discrimination which has been taking place. Most of that has taken place in the employment context. And by the way, let me say that the fallout of this decision about schools on employment is something to keep an eye on. Right? The court was talking about education, but this might have effects on employment too. But the issue essentially is this. When courts order remedies, what we're talking about is providing relief against people who have in fact discriminated. But what has been most controversial has been what we call voluntary affirmative action. Situations where institutions decide to, for whatever reason, diversify their workforce, give people a chance who've been essentially kept out of society's institutions, to play a role in those institutions on a voluntarily, without being ordered to do so by a court and without any findings of past discrimination. So that's essentially where the idea of affirmative action comes from. In the decision that we are focusing on today, nothing in it touches whatsoever the ability of courts to order affirmative action relief when the university or employer has in fact engaged in discrimination. The court was solely looking at situations where institutions have voluntarily taken it upon themselves to essentially provide this form of program, as I said, for a number of reasons, but the main one that's been accepted by the courts is to essentially diversify the workforce and education institutions themselves. The benefit of employment of affirmative action is, I think, open for all of us to see. This society has come in tremendous ways over the past 30 or 40 years in terms of, at least where it looks, having people represented from all walks, all races, all ethnic groups. There's still a lot of work to do because to get to the very top, of course, what you'll see is that most of those positions are still, in fact, held by white males. But educational institutions and the workforce in general look so different. They so much more reflect what America looks like, primarily because of voluntary affirmative action programs. Finally, in terms of why did the court make this decision now? I think that, Jamel, you hit on this point in your initial discussion back talking about 2016. The reality is that if Trump would not have gotten those 3 appointees, and there's serious questions about each one of those people, because now we know not only are they right wing, but they are also arguably corrupt, something very new in terms of looking at the court's history. But it was that phenomenon which essentially caused the loss of reproductive rights in terms of a federal right and the new challenges to affirmative action. So I think if the court's composition would not have changed, if Mitch McConnell would not have worked to essentially steal an appointment from Barack Obama, if in fact Trump had not manipulated the process so that Ruth Bader Ginsburg could get reappointed in such an inappropriate manner, we wouldn't be in this situation that we are in today. But we are where we are, we have to fight to make the best of it.
That's absolutely right. Thank you so much. I hope those who are listening, he gave you a straight, raw, and real condensed version of what's happening. And I hope that you are encouraged to support, this phenomenal professor and many organizations that are looking into this research as well. So, Carolina, I'm going to ask you a question. According to CNN.com, while the decision will impact admission policies that have historically benefited Black and Latinos or Latinx students, the ruling still allows colleges and universities to consider an applicant's discussion of how race has affected their life, as long as it is concretely tied to a quality of character or unique ability that an applicant can bring to the school. My question to you is, what comes directly to Black and Hispanic prospective college when it comes directly to Black and Hispanic prospective college students? What do you feel college and universities are afraid of when it comes to their presence in the college spaces pursuing higher education?
I'm going to start off by saying that I do not have affirmative action expertise. I think I could probably speak for myself in terms of probably benefiting from affirmative action, being Hispanic. I think, we have to step back a little bit in terms of like, what is the new landscape? And whenever you make something more optional, it's really going to depend on the leadership, right? So I know that top universities have come out and expressly quoted this sentiment that we will use this leeway to continue with de facto affirmative action. But again, there will be leadership changes in any institution. And it is then we worry that, again, despite being able to add your experience as a minority person or person of color in your personal statement per se, how much leverage are you going to have when there is, again, a change in objective and mission down the line? And I think personally, that's what I worry about, this greater discretion that is subject to leadership changes.
Awesome. Thank you for that answer. All right. So we are going to ask another question and continue into it. And Winston, I know you're about the student debt side, but if you feel free to jump in, but this will be open to anyone. So even though this decision impacts the country, according to the United States Constitution, states have the power to enforce or pass laws to counter decisions from the Supreme Court. We have seen this with Roe v. Wade, sanctuary cities, and others in the last 3 to 5 years. Do you feel that this decision can impact the city and state of New York? And with CUNY's rich history of Black and Brown students fighting for their spot in admissions programs, do you feel that CUNY will fight harder than private colleges and universities in the city in ensuring that this decision will not affect the university in any way? Why or why not? Anyone can answer.
So I'll start, but I will do the same caveat as Carolina that I'm an attorney. I'm a consumer protection attorney. I work on these issues from different areas, and we'll get to the student loan debt case as well, but I'm not a constitutional scholar or affirmative action specialist. But all that being said, right, one thing to sort of bridge from your last question, Mel, to answering this question. First of all, some schools are working really hard, right, to make sure that they're accessible. So I don't want to paint with too broad a brush, because there are administrators and leaders who are really following great examples from schools that have been doing this very well, or looking to HBCUs and figuring out what they can do to be as sort of progressive and welcoming and diverse as we all want them to all be. But I will say one thing that some people who have power and trying to hold on to power might be afraid of, right, to use the term in your earlier question, is that whenever you are trying to dismantle a system of privilege, the people who have the privilege generally try to hold on to it, right? So there is just, when you are making something more equal, someone is losing power. That's just sort of the way it works, right? There are a finite number of spots in a college, and when you want to make sure that people on merit or on their potential or as a sort of reparative measure are getting access to those seats, people who've historically gotten them much more easily are going to have to work a little bit harder, right? So I think there's just, and as Professor Deale said, like, a lot of these leaders have been, I think you said this, have been sort of white men historically, and that is an important backdrop to understanding sort of, I think, this whole broader thing. To actually go to the question you just asked, sometimes cities and states and local governments have a lot of legal authority to counteract Supreme Court decisions, and sometimes they have very limited legal authority, but they have practical authority, right? They have decision-making authority. They can structure their programs in a certain way. They can't necessarily pass a law that contradicts the federal Supreme Court decision in some instances. And I think here, CUNY does have a really rich history of being an amazing school that's accessible to New Yorkers of all backgrounds. Again, no place is perfect, and CUNY has a lot of things it has to work on. But I think rather than thinking about whether CUNY will be better than every school, I think we should focus on pushing CUNY to try to lead every other school in New York, right? It does not need to be a competition between the city and state university system or private universities that are throughout the state or city. But I think we should all be pushing for everyone to be successful here. And there are things that the Supreme Court decision left the door open on that you mentioned, that Carolina touched on, that can be really impactful. And there's any number of ways that CUNY can try to focus on making sure that students from certain neighborhoods or from certain backgrounds who wouldn't normally find themselves enrolling, get that opportunity to enroll, because that's what a lot of affirmative action is about. It's not giving seats to students who don't deserve it. It's making sure that those students find their way to that seat, right? And making sure that if they don't have a background that would have landed them there more easily, they still have that opportunity.
All right, excellent. Professor Carolina, you want to share any thoughts? I know we just doing, I'll introduce you, Ariel, in a second, but I just wanted to yield to Professor and Carolina if you had any additional thoughts. Will this impact CUNY? Will this impact the state of New York?
Well, I would like to add a couple of things. For one, I think it would be a travesty if CUNY did not get up to speed on reacting to this decision. A lot of schools have already done so. A lot of schools within CUNY have already done so. Like my law school, took a position condemning the Supreme Court's decision and saying that we're going to continue to try to do what we've been doing. In fact, do a better job of it than what we've essentially been doing. Sarah Lawrence College actually took the paragraph, Jamel, that you quoted from the Supreme Court's decision about using the essay. They took that paragraph and essentially put it in their admissions process to direct students to address that paragraph as a way to essentially open up the possibility of continuing to get a very, very diverse student body. I think that that's a great idea for them to have done that. And since CUNY has historically had its mission to educate the people of New York City, Blacks, Latinos, and other ethnic groups and immigrants, and has to a large extent done a very successful job with that, bringing those folks into the middle class. And look at it yourself, for example. I was so impressed to hear how you describe your year since 2004 within the CUNY system, Jamel. So, it's not perfect, but it's worked. And I think we need to keep CUNY's feet to the fire about this so they can really live up to their reputation.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Carolina, any thoughts? Ditto to everything.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm going to echo everyone and highlight that New York City is, we are very fortunate because we do have that diversity, and people like ourselves, some in this room, have been able to obtain a higher education where we may be in leadership positions. So there's definitely a lot more hope in terms of CUNY. And I echo the desire that we should be leading the way here in the city and across the state, and obviously be a role model across the nation.
Excellent. Yes, this is absolutely something that we need to be paying close attention to. It has been something that has opened so many doors. And again, I want to just lift up the names of those students who in the 60s and 70s, you know, from York College to BMCC to Brooklyn College and many others, you know, Hostos and all those who really fought for their positionality and their space to be a part of the higher educational cloth. So I just want to say that, you know, we are continuing to do the fight, and there are many organizations like yourselves, including CUNY Rising, that are doing amazing work. So let's continue to push the good fight. Now, as we know, with affirmative action, that was a stunning blow. But for those of us like myself, who is proud to say that he has, you know, an associate's, bachelor's, and 2 masters, right? Because I believe in what Malcolm X said, which is education is the passport for the future, for it belongs to those who prepared for it today. Many of us are in student debt. I just saw a recent report on MSNBC that it has surpassed credit card debt by over 150%. So we are talking about many students who understand the concept of pursuing their higher education because it is a gateway to upward mobility. It is an opportunity to pursue their goals and dreams in whatever industry that we want to desire to be in. However, once we leave the educational system, you know, whether it's the federal government, if it's private, or if it's the infamous Sallie Mae or Freddie Mac, right? They're knocking at your door wanting to add more stress to our lives. And we know that student debt is a big issue. President Joe Biden did his best at first to try to alleviate this with the student borrow debt program. And of course, it was brought before the Supreme Court, and that was another stinging blow. So we want to get into student debt, and we are joined by Miss Ariel Clark. Ariel, you can show your video if you're able to. She is a graduate from SUNY Buffalo, class of 2023, and is part of the Young Advocates program, alumni program with Young Invincibles. So we are so happy that she's here to join us. So the second half, ladies and gentlemen, is going to be talking about student debt. So Caroline, I'm going to present this to you with the first question. In a stinging defeat for President Joe Biden, as I mentioned before, the Supreme Court blocked the administration's student loan forgiveness plan, rejecting a program aimed at delivering up to $20,000 of relief to millions of borrowers struggling with outstanding debt. According to Chief Justice Roberts, the government needs direct authorization from Congress. This is his words. The question here is not whether something should be done. It is who has the authority to do it. My question to you is, how will this directly impact those who are in student debt in the United States today? And what are the possible next steps on the path to have debt-free student loans?
So I'm going to start by saying that I see student loan borrowers and help them create strategies to tackle their student loan debt on a daily basis. And one of the saddest thing is that, you know, it's not who has the power. The president has powers, Congress has powers. Clearly, the Supreme Court, everyone probably here agrees, overstepped their authority. But after Roe v. Wade, we knew that was probably going to happen. I don't think people realize the impact. If we think this crisis is bad right now, you just have to think about a decade from now, 2 decades from now, the retiring population will still be dealing with their current debt. And then the general society, the people who are against debt relief are going to say, well, you didn't make strategic financial decisions. It's your fault that you don't have a safety net. So what are we going to do then? And I can tell you that it is no longer a younger generation issue. We are seeing an increasing number of parents who are near or in retirement facing 100 or more in student loan debt. So the crisis is real, and I worry more of like what's going to happen in the future when, again, people were not able to save for retirement and have more or less a safety net. Now, with that said, I want to be pragmatic. And one of the things that we see in my practice is a lot of us, when we start repaying our student loans, we don't really have a strategy. And a lot of people may think the strategy is to pay back your loans. Well, that may no longer be possible for a lot of people who have borrowed more that they can realistically repay within a reasonable time. So I think that there are a lot of programs that go beyond the 10 or 20,000. There's a new repayment plan that actually became available today online at studentaid.gov. And really, you want to look at your situation and figure out, am I in a position to pay off my loans as soon as possible? And if so, treat it like credit card debt. The sooner you pay it off, the more you're going to save in interest. If that is not your case, then you're going to be looking at a forgiveness program. Do you work in the public sector? If not, then you're looking at eventual forgiveness by enrolling in an income-driven repayment plan. And the third strategy that we come across often is usually for older adults. You could get the lowest repayment plan and then be okay with dying with this debt. Student loan debt is dischargeable upon death, right? And that may seem horrible that I'm even talking about, like, just pay the lowest you can until you die. But that is in fact a realistic strategy that I'm having to talk to people who are pre-retirement, and it would take them 25, 30 years to pay it off. So I want to say and plug in that the federal government right now, the Department of Education for the last 2 years has been implementing a lot better options than 10 and 20,000. You guys can go into our website or studentaid.gov. I'll put in our direct program website. We have an entire toolkit, and I know Winston has a bunch of other resources through their organization. You could be debt-free within a reasonable time. You just have to know what strategy you're pursuing and be diligent about it.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Anybody want to jump in and add a little more to that question? How do you feel this decision will impact those who are in student debt today, and what are the possible next steps?
Yeah, I'll just sort of underscore a point that Carolina made. First, I want to give huge props to Carolina for the work that she does. And New Yorkers are, I mean, I work nationwide. New York is leaps and bounds ahead of every other state in that, A, they have Carolina and her team and have a publicly supported network of counselors who you can contact for free and have them give you individualized advice about your student loans, right? That's like the holy grail standard in most states, and most states just don't have it. So really amazing to have her tonight, but also as a partner in doing this work and as a resource for borrowers, and to have that pragmatic, like, look, we should talk about the best possible policy environment, but that doesn't help people pay their loans next month, right? So Carolina's program does that, which is really important and can't be overlooked. The thing I would add is just to take something Carolina said and really hammer it home in response to your question, Jamel, which is that the Supreme Court decision was about a very specific program. It was about whether or not President Biden could cancel $10,000 or $20,000 of the student loan debt for people who met the eligibility requirements. It did not touch the rest of the federal student loan system. It did not touch the program where if you work in public service for 10 years, you get your debt canceled. It did not touch the program where if you're someone who's living with a disability that makes it hard to make a living wage, you get your debt canceled. It did not touch the income-driven repayment plan program that Carolina said that sets your monthly payments, pegs it to your income, not how much you owe, to make it slightly more affordable, and has some discharge options there. If you're a teacher, you can get your debt canceled. So as you know, just to answer the question, like, what does this mean for the rest of it? Really, what we have to do is don't be discouraged, like, be a little pissed, right? Be angry, be motivated, have that fire lit under you, but don't put your head in the sand, right? Work with people like Carolina to figure out what you have to do, and then like demand accountability going forward for all the other big policy solutions. But this was just like one plank in a platform of options for people who are struggling with their debt.
Wow, thank you for that. And I will attest that someone who is, I think the federal government is ready to like prance on my door. They're like, you got about 8 more months before you graduate, before they start prancing. So, and I'm in the 6-figure club, and I have no problem saying that, but it is worth every penny, because like many students, and I share this, many students, when we take out student loans, it's not just for the tuition and fees and things like that. For many of us, in between finding work, it has helped us to pay rent. It has helped us to, have the daily essentials and quality of life. I can attest many times as a night attendant and someone who has had no job and out of a job for quite some time, in between jobs while doing this work of being in service. It is very, very tough. And those student loans, don't necessarily just help in one area. And so I want to lead with this next question, and and Ariel, you're more to welcome to jump in on this one as well. As part of the decision, the Biden administration has made it easier for many borrowers to seek federal loan student forgiveness from several existing debt cancellation programs. New rules that are set to take effect, which has already begun, could broaden eligibility for public service loan forgiveness program, which is what you guys were already talking about, which is aimed at helping government and nonprofit workers. And a new income-driven repayment plan proposal is meant to lower eligible borrowers' monthly payments and reduce the amount they pay back over time. So the question to the panel is this: for low income and working class income households, do you feel that this is enough? Why or why not? And the second question, and I want you to kind of be real with this, what do you think the Supreme Court is pretending not to know when it comes to student debt and the challenges that students face? Anyone can jump in.
I'll just get us started and I'll focus on the new repayment plan option. You know, the idea would be you eliminate student debt easily with like the 5-minute application that they had regarding the 10 and 20,000 in cancellation. That's immediate. You don't have to do paperwork. You don't have to renew every year. But I want to say that the new plan may actually be more beneficial than most people think, because it's truly getting closer to making things affordable and then giving you the opportunity to reach, again, whether it's public service loan forgiveness or eventual forgiveness. We do foresee, and we're already seeing, a huge impact just along with the implementation of this plan this year. It's going to get better next year. And so I feel that by far is probably more impactful out of all the new initiatives and flexibility of the different programs that we have had available. And so I am hopeful that that is going to give people more discretionary income, obviously, to meet their basic needs, as we all have talked about. It's not just like, it's an impact on an entire household, right? Like, how do I provide food, shelter when inflation is at all-time high in New York, a very expensive place? So I'm just gonna say that while not perfect, and while we would all have hope for a quick solution in the sense of like, let's eliminate as much debt as possible for as many people as possible, that new plan is a little bit promising.
Thank you for sharing. Ariel, would you like to share your thoughts? What do you think? Do you feel like this is helping working class and low income households, or do you feel it's not enough?
Thank you so much. Also, I want to say thank you for introducing me. It's lovely to be here with all of my fellow panelists. I think it's enough in the sense of where it will reach a certain demographic, right? But then I think surrounding programs like this, it's a matter of access and equity, right? That will definitely be a problem, right? Whether or not people will really know this is existing, and also whether or not people are actually okay with even participating in the program, with the longstanding issues of whether or not their student debt and student loans will be paid for. It's just been like a never-ending battle of, okay, will they, won't they? So I think it will be an issue of, is it enough in that context? And I guess, like, what is it Supreme Court pretending not to know? I think they're pretending not to know whether or not people have issues on the basis of socioeconomic status and, of course, their racial and ethnic identities. So I think it's pretty much just all of that encompassing whether or not it's resources and access to these programs. What does that look like? Will they be able to know? Is there enough outreach about it? Will people have the right information about how to exactly use it to their advantage, which is definitely beneficial to have you here, Carolina, to really talk about it more. So people, of course, like myself, I'm learning things as well, even being here and having student loans myself. So I think it's not enough in that context where low income and working class income households and people within those backgrounds, they will be able to possibly access it in the sense of utilizing the program, but will they know where to start and how to really use it to their benefit, and to kind of just have sustainability in mind for that, like the long-term aspect of it in my mind.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And by the way, those who are still with us, we want to say thank you. And if you have any questions, you can submit your questions in the chat to the host, and we will make, there is a time for Q&A. So we want to make sure that you are able to ask your questions as well. So my next question is to you, Winston, right? Right. We right into student debt. This is a big, big issue. I tell you, as a millennial, right? They're already doing research on what's going to impact us when we get old and gray and how it will impact us in a way that will surpass generations who have experienced any type of debt, right? And it goes back to what Carolina and Ariel was saying, where, you know, this is far more damaging than what we can expect. So Winston, my question to you is, and we kind of talked about it, student debt has already surpassed credit card debt in the financial rolls of this country. Specifically, what can the state of New York do to lead the way in helping students have debt relief? And what do you feel are the action steps? Let's say you were to tell us right now, homework assignment. What do you think are the action steps to making this reality? Whether it's calling somebody, whether it's petition, whatever that looks like.
Yeah, no, it is. I mean, it's really staggering just the intergenerational impact that student loan debt has already and will continue. It's like snowballing, right? And not just credit card debt, Jamel, but student loan debt is bigger than auto debt, bigger than every kind of other debt than mortgage debt, right? So what does that mean, right? That means if you add up all the mortgage debt in New York State, that's bigger than student debt. But if you add up student debt in the state, that's bigger than adding up each other type of consumer debt, right? Credit card, auto loans, home equity lines in your house, stuff like that. This is a big financial problem, and it's only getting bigger, literally. So, just to level set with people, right? Most student debt is federal student debt, and it comes from federal law. And that means that the states have tools so that they only have so many tools they can use, right? The states can't pass laws that rewrite federal law. That's not the way that our country's legal system works. What the state can do, though, and this goes on Ariel's point, which I thought was so good, like something is only as effective as it is known about, right? You can't opt into a program no one ever told you about. So something the state can do that's actually really easy, but there's still room for improvement for, is just being a trusted messenger, making sure when people, graduate with debt or any indicator that they might be having problems paying their debt, make sure they know about all those programs Carolina talked about, make sure they know about Carolina's program itself, right? Make sure that all these things are accessible to people. And there's ways to do that are both just messaging. We could have the governor, we could have state senators and assembly members and all sort of public figures talking about this more publicly and talking about it in terms of the resources available. But we can also bake it into screening protocols, right? If you are receiving any sort of subsidy from the state, they should be screening you to see if you have student loan debt so that they can direct you to that resource, right? Anytime you interface with the state government or the city government, they should be screening you and making sure that you know what resources are available to you. And then the final big picture things, I don't want to lose the forest for the trees, right? As we were saying earlier, it's like so important to deliver relief to people who need it right now. It's not helpful to someone who can't pay their bill to just talk about 50,000 foot stuff in the future. You need to do both. You need to walk and chew gum. So we've been doing the chewing gum part, but the walking part is how do we get to debt-free college, right? How do we prevent New Yorkers from even taking on this debt? When do we decide that this is a public investment and not something where we want to debt finance our education? And again, CUNY has a really amazing history of being sort of a people's college and affordable college. And I know that's not the case for everyone right now who tries to go to CUNY as an example. So we can deal with the debt as it is, and the state can do a lot of messaging. The state can police the system to make sure that the programs are working. They can't change the programs. They can just make sure they work and are communicated. But then the state can also do a lot to support and finance higher ed so that people who choose to get that education don't have to take on crippling debt to do it.
Wow, absolutely powerful and amazing. And I mean, this is serious situation that we're in. And if our trusted representatives in our city and state legislature, let alone you've seen the drama that's happening on the federal level, don't do anything about it, it's going to be a burden not only for us as fellow millennials, but Gen Z is already beginning to get the tap on the shoulder. I just had a little niece, part of Gen A. I'm thinking about her generation, like, oh my goodness, this is happening. So this yields to me, I just called an audible doctoral question came in. I'm yielding to you, Professor Deale, because you're someone who has a wealth of knowledge. And I want to ask you, based on your knowledge of the law and just even the historical concept of our racial ethnic groups, more particularly in the Black and brown communities, Hispanic, Latinx communities, during the time of post-civil rights and, you know, Black Power era, and even in the early 80s, should we have seen this coming? Was there a moment where, you know, enrollment went up, you know, we was definitely making barriers across schools and universities, but I don't know if this was really talked about. I was born in 1985. I just turned 38, so I don't know too much. But I'm curious to know, like, should our communities or leaders seen this coming? What was missing? What do you think, based on the pursuit in the essence of law, that could have helped prevent all of this?
You're referring to the student debt issues particularly?
It could be with either student debt or affirmative action, like which in your opinion.
Well, let me try to connect them up. The last data that I saw suggested that in terms of student debt, it was disproportionately affecting women of color, right? Now, as I said, I haven't looked at the most recent data in that regards, but that's what I saw. And that should not be surprising to anybody, right? Because the reality is that the way the society is structured, right? People of color go into these institutions having less support than white students do. They don't have the traditions of higher education that white students do, which is what the whole legacy thing is about. They are, in many respects, first generation college attendees. So yes, I mean, the financial difficulties that they are going to experience are going to be much more severe than those of your typical white entering college student. And as I said, I think the data supports that. Now, one of the questions which is still open, although I've heard people say this, is that not only do we have to be concerned about the affirmative action decision touching hiring, right? But it also may touch student aid, right? There are numerous collegiate programs, not necessarily run by schools, but by private donors, who essentially provide money to institutions with the general idea, we would like people of color to benefit from this. Can schools continue to administer those programs under this legal regime that we have now in light of the recent affirmative action case? That's a very serious question to me, right? By the same token, to the extent that, as I said before, women of color were disproportionately affected by student debt. Can anything be done about that, targeting that particular population in light of the Supreme Court's decision? As I said, there's nothing in the court's language about that, but you sort of put two and two together, it does not look very good. Another piece I want to just say is in terms of Winston's point, which is that the most recent decision on student debt does not touch anything other than that particular program which the Biden administration was seeking to put forward. By the way, my feeling is that that program that the Education Secretary relied upon was specifically in place to allow for that kind of authority to be exercised. So I see this decision as being every bit as wrong as the decision about affirmative action and the decision about abortion, right? But even looking at it within that particular limitation, right? As I said before, the overflow from the affirmative action decision can in fact target programs which are designed to address the reality that students of color are coming out of schools needing more loan benefits to continue in school, but also needing more debt relief when they in fact leave the school. And the question is, to what extent are those programs going to be upset by the Supreme Court decision?
Wow, excellent. Well, spot on. All right. So,
and Jamel, can I add to one point about the Supreme Court decision, just to pull in an earlier question too? You asked, what did the Supreme Court not get right or something? What is
the Supreme Court pretending not to know?
Pretending not to know. Yeah, exactly. And I totally agree with the professor and with Carolina and Ariel that the outcome is very bad. So I don't want to diminish that. But what is perhaps more chilling to me is I don't think they're pretending anything. I think they are very straight talking, saying, here's what we're going to do. And what are you going to do about it? Right? The Supreme Court, who watches the watchmen, right? There's no one above them. And Congress is dysfunctional right now. So what was so galling to me in reading it was how thin their arguments were based on how dramatic the outcomes were. And it just, I don't even, what's that expression they're saying the quiet part out loud or whatever. I think they're past pretending at this point because they got that 6-3 that you were talking about in 2016 and that you started this panel with, right? So I just think that's an important context for the high court that we're dealing with right now is I don't think there was much pretending going on, which to me is its own sort of chilling reality.
Wow, thank you for sharing that. That was absolutely powerful, and you're absolutely right. And there's a lot of work to be done. So in the midst of this student debt situation, I want to yield it to you, Ariel, because first of all, congratulations on being part of the class of 2023, graduate of Buffalo, SUNY Buff. I know it was a very exciting, challenging journey, but you did it. So you're a part of the alumni, the millions of alumni across SUNY and the millions of alumni across this country. So I want to ask you, how does this decision personally impact student loan borrowers like yourself? And how do you fellow alums feel about this as well? But more importantly about you, like how does this impact you?
Well, thank you so much for starters. That 4 years was definitely a time of my life, in a good and bad way, of course. I would say as far as student borrowers just like me, just looking even moving forward as I try to advance my education going into grad school this coming August, I would say it really is like, we just don't know, right? We're just completely out of the know, right? Everything seems to be evolving constantly in regards to how a student debt being paid for, whether you're working within, of course, nonprofit or public sector work and getting those repaid through those programs, or of course, if you're going into various industries where your company may be repaying things, or if you're doing tuition reimbursement, it's just a matter of like, there are options, but we don't really know how. And I say it even for myself, right? There's so many different avenues, but then it really, of course, depends on what career you're going into. It depends on what outlook you want for your life. And then also the type of age we all live in my generation, because I'd say I'm Gen Z-ish, right? In the sense of everything's digital now, like people become influencers, people want to work remote, right? But then it also changes the aspect of like where your finances coming from. How are you going to pay off of your debt, right? Like, and what exactly will your debt look like over time in regards to interest, in regards to whether you have public or private loans, right? Even if within these cases, like these more often than not will go towards public ones, but as far as like federal or private loans in that sense, it's just a matter of like, what should I do next, right? We just don't know what's going to happen next, or even just for myself, I can say that. But there is also, I guess, bits of hope, bits of optimism, I should say, because as we become more aware of things, we constantly are telling each other, constantly trying to do this through social media, right? Whether it's through Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, you have no idea how often I just learn things by watching TikTok. So I'd say that's just one of the ways that folks like me, whether it's current alumni or recent alumni, we're trying to figure it out in that way through community amongst each other. But then also it's just a matter of like, I don't want to say we're all like trauma bonding, like how do we get through this together? But it also is that aspect too, like, oh my gosh, this is terrifying, but how can we come together kind of collectively, similar to like with Young Invincibles when I was a part of that program this previous spring. A lot of us were either graduating or we're currently in college, and we would talk about it like, how are we going to navigate student debt? What does that look like? But then the fact that we were able to come together, talk about it, and kind of figure out some sort of calls to action together, it kind of helped make it to where it wasn't as scary, right? Because I talked about the unknown. What does that look like? And I think for all of us, it's like we're navigating so many changes within just like undergrad school. And then from there, also student debt. And it's just life is just throwing several different obstacles on our way. So I would say this decision kind of just throws us left field even further, right? It kind of disenfranchises, especially since I'm a woman of color. We touched on that as well. I'm a Black woman. It's even scarier, right? Because you know already that the world is kind of just fighting against you in every aspect, financially, socioeconomically. Like it just makes it kind of even more daunting. But then also it creates that level of like, we can fight in numbers, right? We can come together in numbers and try to figure this out despite all the different types of adversity that may come our way.
There we go. Sorry, had a little technical error. All right. First of all, Ariel, thank you for sharing that. And I echo your sentiments because, as I said earlier, it's a few months away, and I'm telling you, the federal government is like, "We're coming for you, Jamel. You got your doctorate, but all that student loan, man, you better hit this Powerball tomorrow in order to completely pay off this student debt." But it is so real, and I think many of us are in these situations. And I want to close with this as we prepare for next steps. There are many of us that don't talk about this too, and I'm not afraid to share this too. There are many of us that graduate and have a very difficult time entering the workforce to obtain those gold jobs that we have. Because one of the things that I share and teach, even in businesses, and I talk to them about this, you got to be a little more open to this. You can't have experience without an opportunity, right? And if you're constantly looking at the standard that you got to have this type of experience, this type of experience, but the doors are not being open, then alums who are fresh out, who are ready, who may have graduated summa cum laude, thank you, Lordy, magna cum laude, and really are going out there and ready to say, here I am, but they say, no, 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 no. And that makes it even more difficult to get the experiences, which makes it even more difficult to get the income, and which makes it even more difficult to pay off those student debts. So I think you definitely want to share. Thank you so much for sharing that. And this was a quick hour of power, as you could see. A lot of information was shared in the chat. All of the information is provided for you all. As I like to say, just like a number, if a number is given to you, don't let it just sit there in your storage. Use it, maximize it. They are there for us. They are there for you. So I want to say thank you to this panel. You can give a clap, wave, hand wave, those who are watching. We want to thank you all so much. The next steps, because I'm always all about next steps. First and foremost, I know politics for many of you is very dense. It may suck, but it impacts every single thing that we do. And those who don't know, in our communities, our fellow organizers and activists, we all say all politics is local. Call your local officials, your cities and state representatives, whatever it is, to put this on the agenda. Right now, the state assembly, state Senate, they're chilling right now. They're getting themselves ready for the 2024 agenda. So you need to be putting this in their ears now while the session is kind of quiet right now. Secondly, be a part of organizations like these before you, who are working tirelessly to educate you, to empower our communities, to get this information to be ahead of the curve as much as possible. Each one reach one, each one must teach one, right? We know how it is when it comes to filtering information in our communities. It does not always get reached. And there's many factors that we could talk about that at another time. But if you have the information here, let's spread the word. If we could spread the word about Beyonce being at the Renaissance tour this past weekend at MetLife, and even though I wanted to be there, right, and I've seen it all over, we could do the same thing in the pursuit of education. Lastly, this event was sponsored and led by CUNY Rising Alliance. So I want to thank the members of CUNY Rising who made this possible. That's Young Invincible, Citizen Action, University Student Senate, YDSA. I'm thinking I'm missing a few others. Citizen Action of New York, and NYPIRG, and many others that are part of this great coalition to fight and make sure that the City University of New York is free and fully affordable for all New Yorkers to come. So we want to say thank you all. We appreciate you all being a part of this. Let's continue the good fight and in pursuit of higher education for everyone, so that way we all could be educated. And regardless of how we look, regardless of our background, education is a human right, and we will continue to fight. Thank you all so much. Have a great night.